What? Nah. What's his religion? LDS. He's a Mormon. How is a Mormon going to? And nothing against this is nothing. I mean, you know, a lot of. Anyway, nothing against Mormons. My question is, how is a Mormon going to pitch to social conservatives, who are usually evangelical Protestants? Mitt Romney. How is Mitt Romney going to speak redneck?
With throwing money.
Yeah, but that's going to take a lot. Mitt Romney, like I said, he is cut out of the old school Republican mode, the fiscal conservative, big business, Citibank and Chase, and I think Citibank and Chase have already given him over $700,000. It's not even the general election yet.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money before the election, especially. Usually the losing candidate in the election gets that much from a financial contributor. They've already given that much to him, and if he doesn't get the nomination, he doesn't know. They don't know what's going to happen anymore. They don't know what's going to happen. They give him so much money. That's a problem. The problem with this thing dragging out with the Republicans is they're going to be giving all this money to someone who might not win the nomination. Not to say they don't have more, but it would look a little. It's bad enough they give money as it is. It would look real bad if they gave billions. If someone ended up giving $1 billion in a campaign. Not to say that's not legal. Not to say that's not legal. But the candidate basically in the primary season is one person. That candidate gets a nomination. Whatever appealed to the people with these other candidates, he's going to have to adopt those other candidates' platforms and therefore have to do what? Shift somehow or another. You see people's policy positions shift. What does that tell you about people in general if a candidate can shift their policy positions and seemingly not be noticed?
I don't care.
People aren't paying that much attention to see people change their. I mean, if you look at a candidate, they flip-flop all the time, but they know they can get away with it. Why can they get away with it? Because they're not alone. They have no brain. The candidates have no brain. For example, George W. Bush. He didn't have a brain. Karl Rove did. Does anyone know Karl Rove? He was pretty much his strategist. He would write a few speeches. He was his campaign strategist. He would organize these quote attacks. And by the way, what was he? So he was the Swift Boats for Truth. John Kerry, where they attacked him for lying about his Vietnam record. That was Karl Rove. That was his baby. He's the guy behind the scenes. If any of you have ever seen Karl Rove, there's a reason why he's behind the scenes and not present.
Because he's ugly?
He's not. He looks like a. I don't want to offend anybody. You know what the significance of that election was? Bush and Kerry, by the way. Skull and Bones, Yale, Secret Society. They were both members of Skull and Bones. Yet, you think you were voting for two different people. But let's say for Karl Rove, for example, 2000, the Republican primaries, South Carolina, between George W. Bush and anyone know? John McCain. Okay, McCain had some momentum. McCain was probably more qualified than Bush. Karl Rove, though, came up with a plan. McCain has a all right, it doesn't show a picture cover. I just want to kind of hammer this one home. That's his adopted daughter, right there, right here. Adopted daughter. Notice anything about her? She's from Bangladesh. But the skin tone is very much what? What Karl Rove and team did is they circulated a bunch of pictures of her around rural South Carolina, which, you know, a lot of people in rural South Carolina weren't aware that he adopted her, which to them meant what?
Then he wasn't raised in a stern.
No. In rural South Carolina, these people were pretty much convinced that McCain had an illegitimate child with. He was essentially a lover. McCain.
Oh, that's like dirty, man.
He had an affair with a black woman. You know.
Because she said that.
Okay, so it was the other candidates that
George
took the
W. Bush
picture-
did it.
Okay.
Karl Rove, on behalf of Bush,
Okay.
circulating these photos around
Okay.
rural South Carolina, and essentially dirty.
Slammed him, or whatever.
Dirty. And also in 2002, there was a senator from the United Kingdom, or not United Kingdom, why am I thinking United Kingdom? Because it's up here. Georgia, you know, in the United States. Senator from Georgia named Max Cleland, who lost a limb, one arm and a leg in Vietnam. He voted against the Patriot Act. And he voted against the resolution allowing Bush to go to war in Iraq.
What was the Patriot Act?
What is it still?
Isn't that what the government can monitor everything?
Yeah, I'm trying to, there are probably cameras in here. Yeah, in the name of terrorism. So they bomb something, so let's observe the whole population. Yeah, he voted against that. He voted against the resolution to allow Bush to use force against Iraq. And of course, Iraq was part of the, quote, war on terror. And the Patriot Act was to protect us from terrorism. So Cleveland, with one arm and one leg, voted against it. He voted against the Patriot Act. Therefore, he must be supporting terrorism. He voted against the resolution using force in Iraq, which was connected to the war on terror. Therefore, he is again supporting terrorism, and he must be unpatriotic. He loses the election. Yeah, he lost the election. The 94 election, when Bush was elected governor of Texas, they pretty much, and Richards was a fairly moderate conservative Democrat. Well, they portrayed her as a liberal. They rehearsed for them for the presidency and the campaign for Ann Richards. But there's a lot of things like that that have happened. Rove is just he's the brains behind it all. However, Rove, I don't know if he really was directly influenced by him, but Goebbels, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's right minister of propaganda and, what is it? It was on there. Minister of propaganda and decent behavior or something like that. But again, these people are the brains behind it all. They are the psychoanalysts in the campaign. They know what people's buttons are. They know what's going on inside you when you don't. Does that make sense? Circulating a picture and not saying a word about it throughout rural South Carolina, they knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing. Again, the subconscious individuals. Now you have to talk about advertising. You have television, radio, internet. Ground wars, it does not mean they show up in a tank. It means they travel places. What do you think determines what a candidate does? Advertise or travel someplace? Simple. Money. What do you think costs more? A TV ad or traveling all over the country? That can get expensive because you have to bring people with you. You have to bring your brains and your staff. You have to pay them all. You want to use that money wisely. So if you are wanting to travel someplace as a presidential candidate, for example, where would you want to go?
Ohio.
Yeah, usually. That's always going to be one. But the point is, what? Ohio's what type of state? One that could swing one way or the other, kind of purple. North Carolina, and maybe South Carolina again someday. I don't know though. North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana. I don't know about Indiana so much. Michigan, Wisconsin, A lot of them in the Midwest and the Upper South, and some of them out west, like Nevada, could be considered one. Colorado. That's where you spend your money. Why, if you were Barack Obama, would you not want to take you, your brains, and your whole staff to Idaho? Aside from physical danger. Solid. There's one, I mean, there's 3 seats in Idaho. One of them is Democrat, but Idaho has not voted Democrat in a presidential election, I think, in about 100 years. So, you'd be an idiot if you went out there, for any reason. But, why would George W. Bush, or no, why would Rick Santorum, Mr. Social Conservative, not want to campaign in New York City? It's there's not a lot of social conservatives. They don't dominate New York City, for example. But yeah, it's where you spend your money. It's where you have a chance. Where you think you can have a chance. And it's the same thing here. Barack Obama would not want to spend a lot of time out in California because it's usually a blue state and you don't want to put too much effort into it. Now, like a television ad, for example, a television ad in Texas. Someone's just come home from work. This is 2004. They've had a long day at work, and they hate all those people taking advantage of welfare and all that kind of junk, and they had a long day sitting in traffic and all that crap. And they get home, and George W. Bush is running an ad that constantly say, John Kerry and his liberal allies, John Kerry and his liberal allies, liberal allies, liberal allies, liberal allies. Again, the subconscious. Liberal, 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 liberal. Again, point made. What's the key word? Liberal, liberal. You might as well shoot him the finger. Not that wasn't directed even at you, but I mean, it's just like basically a an assault on the subconscious of a very tired person. Whereas, if you're on your way home from work, and you commute 30 miles, you spend a lot of time in traffic, and you have somebody like Rush Limbaugh on the radio, he might not be employed for much longer. It's not so much that what he said, it's about sponsors diving or jumping ship. And they've always been willing to sponsor him. Now talk about, that guy, I'm not saying I like him or not. He's kind of an artist in a way. He's turned what he does into an art form. He doesn't believe what he says, it's just quote, his work, so to say. But he might have crossed the line on this one.
You really think that? You think he doesn't believe what he says?
Oh, he's a total entertainer.
Well,
He hits on things, like he just pounces on things that it's like in the subconscious. Race issues, obviously, when you're talking about welfare, social, economic issues, he knows what buttons to push. And when someone like him is on the radio, or many others, a lot of conservative talk shows, you're driving on your way home and you hear an ad slamming a presidential candidate, as a liberal or whatnot, or as a welfare proponent and all that, your work is done there. But yeah, it all goes back to the whole Sigmund Freud and psychoanalysis, the subconscious. If something's wrong with someone, it must have been from their childhood. Well, if someone's voting a certain way, it must have been from their childhood. Seriously. And the use of advertising exemplifies this by all means. Television, not so much as radio or billboards. For example, in 2004, they had a big billboard for the 2004 elections, driving on from 183, right around the airport, driving west towards Euless from Irving, and it was Uncle Sam pointing, "Don't believe the liberal media." A pretty powerful statement there. A lot of people commute on that route to Dallas from the suburbs. A lot of people see it. They listen to Rush Limbaugh on the radio, and you see a billboard of Uncle Sam pointing at him, telling him not to believe the liberal media. And they get home and they watch an ad. They're voting Republican, for sure. Television, though, it's not so much a regional thing. For example, New York City's Democrats, but there's still a substantial Republican base in New York, even though they don't win presidential elections. So, if you're George W. Bush, John McCain, Mitt Romney, it wouldn't hurt to air an ad there. it wouldn't hurt to air an ad in Los Angeles,